This show is brought to you by SalCal Real Estate Connections. Welcome to the Telescope View. We're here tonight with the author of The Final Revelation, The Sun Project, co-host Rick Teles, and of course yours truly, Larry Mangello. And tonight's show, Rick, we had a request from our viewers, say if aliens exist, why haven't they contacted us? And believe me, this subject gives me goosebumps because I know you're going to have some very interesting answers to that question.
Yeah, I hope so. This is a question I get a lot. If they really exist, why haven't they contacted us? I think we're beyond the question. I mean, there's a number of theories to this, and we're going to discuss 5 of them. The theory that they don't exist, that's kind of gone. Most people believe, most scientists believe that extraterrestrial life does exist in the universe. 100 billion galaxies, 40 billion planets in each galaxy. It probably does exist. So that question doesn't really come into play here. So we're going to be talking about some of the other theories, some of the other 5 theories that we have that a lot of people mention that you hear a lot about. So.
Okay.
So, okay, we'll start. The first one is the aliens are all dead.
What?
That's one theory, is that the aliens are dead. And maybe we haven't found extraterrestrials because they're all dead. The universe is about 14 billion years old. Okay.
Wow.
And the Earth is 4.75 billion years old. And maybe in that time, there could have been a number of civilizations that evolved and then, of course, went extinct. And what that means is 1 or 2 may have visited Earth, but now they're all gone. And all we really have are ancient artifacts, or maybe some evidence that they've been here, and it's called xenoarchaeology, and that's all that's left.
Boy, that's an interesting concept, I'll tell you that.
It is. Plato talked about Atlantis. The Sumerians spoke about the sky gods. Maybe they came and they went. And maybe we're learning there were even civilizations before the Sumerians. We're learning that there may have been civilizations 1 million years before Christ. Archaeologists are starting to suggest that. So it's possible that in the universe there could have been extraterrestrial civilizations that came and eventually are gone, and same thing's going to happen to us. We're not going to be here forever. At some point, we're going to probably go extinct as well.
Of course, we're president always looking for signals.
Right.
The question is, are they the right signals?
Well, that's another theory. Another theory is that extraterrestrials exist, but we're looking for the wrong signals out there. SETI's been around for about 60 years, believe it or not. People don't realize that.
Yeah.
The search for extraterrestrial intelligence has been around for about 60 years. But recently, it was mentioned by Silvano Colombano, who's a NASA Ames Research Center scientist, that maybe we're looking for the wrong signals. And we mentioned the same thing in the book. I spoke to some of these men, and they said, SETI is all wrong. They're looking for the wrong thing out in space, that an advanced extraterrestrial race that we're aware of does not use radio signals. And the head of SETI actually came out a couple of years ago, and she said the same thing. She wrote a white paper saying, maybe we need to update the type of signal that we're looking for. Colombano said that even if radio signals were still being used by the aliens, the problem is in the process of packing a lot of information into those signals, we wouldn't be able to distinguish a message from an extraterrestrial from the noise, the background noise. So even if an extraterrestrial decided to use such a radio signal as a beacon, we probably wouldn't be able to recognize any information within it. There's just too much noise, too much stuff packed in there. And they also believe, and a lot of scientists believe, that such radio type signals probably in the future will become obsolete. We're not going to use them. We mentioned in one of our last shows gravity wave communications that DARPA and, of course, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program was looking into gravity wave-based communication. So the radio spectrum of radio signals probably is not something that's going to be used. And even in that regard, it's possible that aliens maybe look to communicate with people who are closer in development to theirs.
Well, so it only makes sense. I mean, if they're far advanced, using radio waves goes back to the early 1900s.
Yeah, and it does make sense that maybe that's not something they would be using, and that we are basically looking for the wrong type of signals. And Einstein even suggested this at one point, that the type of signals that we're using then is not what we would be using in the future. So, yeah, that's very possible.
Of course.
And that's theory 2. So theory 1 is the aliens are all dead. That's a possibility.
Yeah.
The second theory is the reason that we haven't, why we haven't seen the extraterrestrials yet, or why they haven't contacted us, is that humans are searching for the wrong signals. We're just looking in the wrong place.
And that makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense. Now we move on. The third theory is that the aliens prefer to remain out of sight. And this one makes a fair amount of sense.
Absolutely.
Maybe the aliens view us as a possible threat. And people are going to say, well, if they're all advanced in this, well, look at this. When we travel to other planets, we're going to be very careful to check that planet out. We're going to look and see, we're going to do some reconnaissance of that planet and see what's there. We do this just in the world today. If we're going somewhere, we want to know who's there. If we're going into a jungle, we kind of want to know who's out there. We do some reconnaissance. We want to understand what's there. We want to understand what animals out there, what animals could be potentially dangerous. So maybe they say, we want to be outside. We consider this group, they could be a potential threat. Okay. What some people suggest is that if they're technologically advanced enough, that they might have actually built massive orbital surveillance structure and kept it cloaked from us. So they're watching us, they're right there.
Yes.
But we can't see this massive orbital structure that they have. Is that possible? Well, we're building bigger and bigger things on Earth today than we've ever dreamed we could build. And we've recently learned from ATIP, again, the Pentagon project, that invisibility cloaking is possible. If not actual invisibility, at least electronic invisibility. You could create optical facades and things like that. So that is possible. We know from our own science that that's possible. In fact, it's interesting how some people have suggested that the moon may in fact be an artificial satellite.
Well, I mean, let's face it. When we send probes to Mars and out in space, I mean, why do we do that? And we're out of sight.
Right. And the other thing is, well, maybe they haven't been here, but somehow they've used lasers, now we've done this ourselves, to create an optical facade around their planet so we couldn't see it. It could be hidden from telescopes, radio telescopes,
yes.
That type of thing, even satellites. And that is, in fact, very possible. This isn't science fiction. This is just possible. We do it all the time. What I heard when we put the book together, what was told to me is that there was a classified report that suggested that the moon might be an observation post, but not saying that it was created by somebody. But the other thing they said, there's one classified report that said alien satellites are hidden within the space junk that orbits Earth.
Yes.
So, okay, that's a possibility. Then the question comes in very quickly, which we didn't know even 3 years ago, was that one of the reasons for ATIP, for the ATIP project,
yes.
the Advanced Aerospace Threat Investigation Program. Was that possible? Because in ATIP, we talk a lot about non-terrestrial threats. So that's not China or Russia. So that's another theory. The aliens just prefer to remain out of sight, okay? Maybe that's one of the cases.
Well, it could very well be. I mean, when you're thinking about what we do to explore the universe, as far as, and we do very little so far,
yep.
But we do not try to make ourselves known, flashing the fact that, hey, we're here. when we're out there looking to see what's there.
Even if you go back to the 1800s, let's say the Wild West days, the 1880s, one thing that you knew out west is you never rode into somebody's camp without announcing yourself or understanding who's in that camp. because you could end up dead if you did that. And that's just, you know, it may sound harsh, but that's the way it was. You never rode into somebody's camp. And if you're a camper, if you're a hiker, if you are a woods person, you like to go out in the woods, hopefully you know that. You just don't walk into somebody's camp. You should never do that. You should be very careful about that. First, you want to know who's in there, and then you want to announce yourself before you walk into camp. Hi,
yes.
I'm so-and-so, can I come into your camp? You just don't walk into a camp that's way out in the woods or out in the woods somewhere. So that's another one. The aliens prefer to remain out of sight, and some people can handle that.
Well, of course, you know, Rick, too. I mean, you know, the next subject we're going to talk about, and that's really reality. They may be here.
they may be here. Now, this is one I know you like. And this is one, there's a lot of people who believe in this. The aliens are already here, and it's not part of the experiment. What does it mean?
If that doesn't get your attention, I don't think nothing will.
The aliens are already here, and they may be taking some time to study us before they unveil themselves. Now, again, when we wrote the book, and I know people believe this is far-fetched and believe what you want, classified reports suggested that humankind is an experiment to test ET theories on the adaptability of species and ecosystems. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, according to one classified report, supposedly the extraterrestrials revealed that their civilization grew faster and larger than their world could accommodate. So what they needed to do is they needed to find a place where they could conduct experiments where they could learn how to adapt. They could adapt their species and their resources to avoid extinction, something that we are likely going to be doing ourselves in the near future. When I say near future, I'm going to say 50 years. So what they wanted to do is they had to find a planet or a world that was suitable for this type of experimentation. They felt that the world was, it was a primitive world, but that it provided a suitable ecosystem, you know, for their research. But in order to simulate the conditions that they needed, like their world, they needed to introduce living entities similar to themselves. Okay? Mm-hmm. And what they said is that early hominids, or early man, were physiologically and intellectually inferior, so they had to accelerate the human evolutionary process to achieve what they called a suitable proxy for their studies. Now, this was what I was told from some military intelligence people and some high-ranking military people. That was in a classified report. People are going to say, oh, no, we can't be an experiment. Well, that's just human arrogance. We seem to think we're the top of the chain. We're not. But very interesting concept that you have here.
Absolutely, absolutely. That sure got my attention, I'll tell you that.
We've done similar things with animals.
Yes.
We've done things with human beings. There's been a lot of studies out there that people now hear that, oh, you did a study with a human being to do what? To test radiation and to do what?
Yeah.
We've done that. All right. Now, we don't have the technology to create a whole world as far as we know, or to affect a world. We're starting to learn that we do through projects like HARP, which can affect the weather. And that's, you know, people say, oh, is that true? It is, sure, it's true. Look at the patent. Don't believe me. It's right in the patent for HARP. So did they actually create what we have here? Now, some people argue that's not possible. Of course it's possible. We're cloning animals today. We're creating animals today right out of DNA. We're creating microprocessor chips out of DNA.
Just, you know, stem cell technology.
Stem cell technology.
Think about it. Just think about that.
The other thing is there are very few scientists, anthropologists, that won't agree that there's a missing link. What is the missing link? I mean, we went through certain periods where all of a sudden things just jumped from dinosaurs to early man to what's the missing link? There's also, and again, look this up, don't take my word for it. There's also, if you talk to geneticists, they will tell you that there's a whole piece of the genetic code that they do not understand, and they said is not normal, is not part of what we are, and they don't know where that came from. We were talking about this on the way in, and people say how far-fetched this is. Yeah, maybe it is. There's a very prominent scientist, cosmologist, astrophysicist by the name of Dr. Paul Davies. Mm-hmm. He wrote an entire article in, I'm trying to remember what magazine it was. It was a very prestigious magazine. And his belief is that life on Earth came from somewhere else. There was no question about that.
Well, sure. When they do DNA, they find things in DNA that they can't figure out why is it there.
And that's true. And you can look that up too. There's also a thing called the panspermia theory, which says that life came here from somewhere else, maybe on a comet, maybe on an asteroid. And there's a lot of people who put a lot of credence in the panspermia theory as well. And it's interesting that, last week we talked about NASA all of a sudden holding classes for educators to talk about the search for life, extraterrestrial life now.
To teach, absolutely.
But it's interesting the way in the description of the class, they say that recent events have made it imperative that now every mission contains a component searching for extraterrestrial life because they believe it may help us understand how life started here on Earth. Consider that statement. Now, that statement can be a very broad statement from everything from the panspermia theory saying that single cells or different components, molecules may have come from somewhere else on comets, asteroids, or whatever that struck the Earth, to everything that, and I know I've spoken to scientists that say, yes, there is a possibility that something could have helped or interfered with the evolutionary process in some ways. I mean, if you're somebody who works in gardening, how many types of plants have we changed? Have we, mutated? And that's what you're doing when you combine the plants and create different types of flowers. It's all possible if you understand it. So that's another one. The aliens are already here, and it's not part of the experiment. A lot of people have trouble believing that they're part of an experiment.
Well,
it is what it is.
Of course, the other thing, Rick, we've talked about these things tonight. But in reality, there's a religious aspect to this whole thing that is another world completely.
That's a whole nother discussion. And again, when we talk about the religious context of this, there's two pieces. There's God and there's religion, and there's a very big difference between the two, okay?
Yes.
Because even according to what we wrote in the book is extraterrestrials concede there is a God, what you would call a God. There is a grand creator to all this, so powerful that even they can't comprehend it. The last argument for aliens is this: why haven't they contacted us? Well, they have. That contact remains a closely held secret, and I happen to believe in this. Why? Because I worked with people who told me this was true. People highly placed in the military and Indian intelligence, very highly placed, and that's what we wrote about in the book. And as we talked about, is that this is an arm's length relationship. It's not like they jump in their flying saucers and come to Earth anytime they want. That's just not the way it is.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's state-sponsored research the same way we explore.
Now, is there a dedicated area for this?
Well, there's a group called Flight 9, and this is their job to communicate. Now, I learned that we have had some type of communication with some extraterrestrial race since the late 1940s, and that would be around Roswell. We're going to talk more about that in some other shows.
Yes, we will.
And I also learned that we use a special computer system dedicated to what is referred to as exchanges, communications with these ETs. And what it does is the computer system converts our speech to an encrypted digital format. Now, this is what I personally saw. It was called NTSEP7X something. It would be a certain number.
So it converts?
It converts it to a cipher. That's what we use. And NT stood for Non-Terrestrial Cyber Encryption Program. Now, when I first saw this working in cybersecurity, myself and some of the rest of us, we thought this was communication with satellites. That's what the purpose of this encrypted cipher was for. And we were told it was not by a couple of people. And we were at first saying, whoa, this is kind of crazy. We were told that although there's a race that can communicate in any language, any form they want, they choose to use this form. They send whatever you want to call it, a text or whatever it does, and we respond to it. And it doesn't happen all the time.
Now, there's a reason for that, though.
Yeah, they think it's because they want to avoid direct general contact with us, and they don't want to give us any technology. They'll give us concepts, they'll give us ideas, but they will not share technology. Now, maybe this is part of the experiment. Who knows? Yeah. Apparently, face-to-face meetings have occurred. They're extremely rare. They wouldn't tell me who they met with, but they're extremely rare, and only for a vital purpose. So I don't know what a vital purpose could be. You know, the end of the earth. Who knows? Obviously, when and where these happen is a very closely guarded secret. This group called Flight 9 apparently knows all about this, and they're the only ones who know about it. And if you know anything about the Air Force and the way it's constructed, like any military, you might have squads and squadrons and platoons. A flight is that in the Air Force. It's a small group, or it can be fairly large, but it
could be an event. It could be.
Yeah, but it's called Flight 9. Yeah. Apparently, I guess extraterrestrials like to text rather than speak directly. And people, because I've had people say, why would a race like that only do through text? But I said, well, what do you do every day? You send emails, we send text. It's everywhere today. And this is the way they prefer to do it, because if you listen to the pop culture out there about UFOs, or you listen to Hollywood, you're going to think, this happens every day, and they just pop in when they want to. No, think of this as a race just like us exploring Mars. What if we had found life on Mars? What would we be doing? Would we be jumping in there every day? Would Larry get into his X-47 spaceship and go there anytime he wants? No, it would be controlled by the government, just the way they're controlling the exploration of all these planets that we have today. Yes. So contact remains a closely held secret. Now, after saying this is not to say that maybe there are people out there who have been contacted, individuals. I'm never going to say never. I've learned to never say never. The things that I've heard and seen, I would never in a million years have believed. But
I have one question for you, though. Has anybody talked about, do they look different or do they look like us?
What I was told is that that the group that they are in contact with look just like us. We are. And this would make sense. If it's an experiment, you're going to create an experiment, especially if it's for your own world, to try and figure out how you can take care of your own world. Yes. You would make something that would be in your own image that would perform like you. Now, an interesting thing about the experiment, or aliens perhaps coming here, the ancient alien or ancient astronaut theory, they were talked about at one time that they came here to mine gold. And they needed the gold because they wanted to put the gold dust in their atmosphere to protect them from radiation, okay? Very interesting, because a year ago, a paper came out from NASA where they discussed a number of different ways to try and solve the global warming.
Oh, yeah.
And they came up with a number of different ideas, and one of them was gold dust in the atmosphere.
I remember they did some things in our own area here.
Yeah.
They did something in the atmosphere to reflect.
You're talking about the shuttle missions.
Yes.
Back in the 70s, if it was right, 70s, early 80s, there was a couple of shuttle missions where they were looking at how they could control the atmosphere by changing the charges in the ions. And they learned through the nuclear weapons program, and they learned through the Saturn V launches that ammonia could do that. So what they did over Connecticut, I believe it was the 80s, you can look this up, they did two experiments over Connecticut. Over Connecticut, the shuttle, I forgot which shuttle mission it was, ejected a bunch of ammonia. And in one case, it turned the night sky blue, a bright blue. And a lot of people noticed it, and they just, what it was written off to, they were told it was an auroral thing. It was a rural situation because of the time. Another time, they let the ammonia out over Millstone nuclear power plant for some reason. I don't know what that purpose was. This is real. You can look it up for the missions. They'll tell you that it was there. Somebody asked me, why do I think they did that in Connecticut? This was somebody from the Navy. And I said, my guess would be because of the number of defense contractors and different types of groups we have in Connecticut, the experiment might have been done over Connecticut so they could observe it firsthand. This actually did happen, so you might want to look that up. It had to do with the radiation belts as well. Back in the 60s, we learned that nuclear weapons actually blew away the radiation belt, and it would come back. At one point, we had 2 radiation belts around the Earth because of this, what the Soviets and what we were doing. You can look that information up, too. That's part of the experiment.
So in reality, Rick, that when the theory about them coming here looking for gold to help their atmosphere makes sense.
It makes sense because we're talking about the same thing possibly for our atmosphere. We're talking about a number of other things, different chemicals, and a number of other things that we could do. But that's the story for tonight.
Well, I'll tell you, that has been a mouthful today. I'll tell you. I mean, the subject about contact just gives me goosebumps.
And obviously, it's much more involved than that. And you know, we're done now. I mean, we got a few seconds left. And that discussion, if people were sitting here, we could go on in the discussion for hours if you want to.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
This subject here is just vast, and you could never come to the end because when they make contact,
Yep.
then it'll be something different. Well, Rick, it's been so interesting tonight, I'll tell you. And I have to say that tonight's show was really a precursor to our upcoming season, which we'll be talking about at a later show. Yeah. I want to thank everybody for viewing in tonight. It's just been an outstanding meeting tonight with you, Rick, with talking about this contact information. It's really special. I want to remind everybody, when you have a question, please email us at theviewshow@aol.com. We want to talk to you, and believe me, we intend to be here for a long time. Thank you, and good night.